Hello, friends. Welcome back to our World in Focus. I'm here with Judah as usual, and we're going to talk about our time in Sikkim.
And also, hopefully the quality is better. We've just found out that Benji's phone um, has a poorer microphone than mine, which seems
Disrespect.
seems to reduce the
Disrespect.
background noise. So we
It's true,
hope
yeah.
that this will be a better experience for you.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, when I leave in April, I'll be back to Benji's terrible phone.
The podcast will probably stop then anyway. So, anywho, um, so we spent the last week in Sikkim. So we were in big cities throughout our time in India, probably only 2 days by the beach in the state of Goa, but we not in the big city. So our 7 weeks in big cities, we were a bit tired of all the noise, the pollution, the heat, the lack of proper sidewalks in many places. And we had a bit of time before our mum and brother came. So we chose to go to Sikkim after exploring different places. And it felt like the first part of the trip that was kind of maybe fully our choice, fully our decision to go, because the other places have been either because we know family or we know people or we had things to do, or they were just transit points that made sense. So Mumbai, we obviously flew into there. Goa, it's a well-known beach destination on the way to our place in Bangalore where we had friends, and Mysore where we have a cousin, and Hyderabad where I volunteered, and then in Calcutta where we have family. So we could have gone anywhere really, but I was interested in the kind of northeast because as I've been learning and reading more about Indian history, the states in the northeast just sound fascinating, and traditionally lots of tribes and remote tribes, and also interestingly, there's three states in the northeast are all majority Christian, which is quite interesting. I think like Nagaland is 88% Christian, so it sounds like a completely different part of India. But we chose to go to Sikkim. Few people, especially our cousin Kapush, mentioned she'd been there, and after reading about it, we thought we'd go for it, and also it was easier to get to because you just get a train from Calcutta for about £15, and then you can get a bus. So, Julia, do you want to share a bit more about Sikkim because you were reading a book about it? I think when we were in Hyderabad, right?
Yeah. So Sikkim is, you could say it's something that's called along the Siliguri corridor or the chicken neck of India, basically. So it like connects. It's basically a very strategic place that connects Bhutan, Nepal, India, and China all together, basically. So it was had its own monarchy until 1975, and essentially there's something. The monarch is called a Chogyal, and there's a book called Sikkim by Andrew Duff, and it goes into all the detail using like leaked CIA reports and stuff that's um, from British intelligence, and basically goes in for this the last monarch. Essentially, there loads more people from Nepal came over, and the monarchy basically was more and more out of touch with the um, population and not wanting to modernize the voting system and give basically Nepalese the same rights as the Lepcha Bhutia, which were kind of the people who were ethnically there before the Nepalese, but Nepalese had a majority. So there's loads of different tussling, lots of different outside powers involved, and essentially they get rid of the old monarch, but they need India for assistance, and essentially they get swallowed up by India and become one of India's states. So they get rid of one monarch for another power, and there's all. So that was all kind of the context, and you can see talking to other people who are mainly Nepalis in Sikkim, like how much the context still affects them today, and there's still separateness in terms of Indian states as they have like tax breaks that you don't have in other parts of India. Other Indians can't buy land there, so it's a bit more protected, and they have different governing laws as well. But even Benji and I, we needed a visa to enter. But compared to East Africa, where there's so much corruption and so much challenges getting across the border, particularly from Kenya to Uganda. This was what Benji said, like the most seamless visa acquiring and moving to a country that we found so far in our
Exactly.
travels.
And and I guess technically it's not another country, and technically I guess they call it an inner line permit, but effectively like a visa, foreigners can only stay for 30 days, and when they join to become Indian state, they still retain some of their autonomy. So you have to go through like official border crossing, get a stamp in your passport, and yeah, and it did effectively feel like a different country. It is popular with tourism, especially domestic tourism. I think lots of Indians go there because you can see snow there, and for many Indians that don't live in the hill stations or mountain regions, it's hard to find snow. In fact, even hill stations like Darjeeling, which are in India, apparently there hasn't been snow there for over 10 years. But we went there just at the in the kind of shoulder season, so it was the end of their winter, the beginning of their spring, and yeah, pretty quiet and not too many tourists, just a few domestic tourists, and yeah, so it was really cool to experience. I think for me, general observations were that it did feel like a different country, which was really cool. It was much colder, which I'm sure we'll talk about soon. The majority ethnic group is Nepali. The majority language, the lingua franca, is also Nepali. And there's a few other ethnic groups. There's some Indians there. There's the natives who have been there for longer. The Lepcha, the Bhutia. So already people looked different, and there was because it also borders Tibet. There was lots of Tibetan food. So there's momos, which are these Tibetan fried dumplings, not fried, steamed or fried dumplings, which are super popular takeaway food in all across India. And there's like thukpa soup. Also, apparently, chow mein is Tibetan originally. It was interesting actually. We went to three Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, and it was the first time that I'd ever come across that belief system. Uh, and I think it's kind of well known with the whole like Dal. I've heard of the Dalai Lama before, and him as a religious figure, but I didn't really know too much about it. The temples were really beautiful colors, but quite different to traditional Buddhism in the sense that I think it originated in like I don't know in Tibet in like the 7th century AD, where they combined Buddhism, which originated in India, of course, with a kind of old Tibetan religion called Bon. I might be getting a lot of this information wrong, but it means that Buddhism technically doesn't have a deity, but in Tibetan Buddhism, there's lots of different deities that people worshipped as deities, and of course, there's different schools of thoughts and things. But it was really interesting just to see a belief system and religion that I don't know anything about. So seeing all the designs and the artwork and seeing monks in their red robes was really cool. And the scenery apparently is very similar to Nepal also, where lots of green rolling hills, and actually on a clear day, which we only had once or twice, you could see the eastern Himalayas and Kanchenjunga, which is the third highest mountain in the world. And it was really beautiful to see that mountain, and quite new for us because we've generally never really done mountain holidays, and we've never seen the Himalayas, which are like a famous mountain range. And typically, if we have a holiday, we avoid the cold. But here, after 6 weeks of intense heat, we were wanting to welcome the cold.
Yeah, and also in the museums, there's some stuff. It was interesting to learn about Buddha, and that was in the I don't know which.
It
I
was
think it was in Gangtok, wasn't it?
it was the Institute of Tibetology in Gangtok, which
Yeah.
looks at the
So that was
history
that was set up by the Chogyal, so it's the monarch. I think 1950s or 60s. So that was at the time when he was trying to really state the case for Sikkim being independent, and so he set up this Tibetology, basically because they've got really good ties with Tibet and basically that their version of Buddhism. And in the museum, you've actually got like horns or instruments made from human bones. Basically, I'm pretty sure it was the human thigh bone. and they make turned holes in it. So I think there's something about what it's symbolizing, death and how close we are to death, etc. And then also there were skulls there as well that were overlaid with silver, so they looked like child size and maybe like a baby size, and some of them look like maybe like a 7-year-old size. So those ones were real skulls, overlaid with silver. So I presume it's when children they when they passed away, etc. I don't know much about it, but that was kind of quite startling, to kind of to see the human skulls used, and that's probably to symbolize death or something. It's used in some type of ceremony. They have ceremonial knives, like small little sharp ones. Um, so yeah, interesting to see some of those things there, and also to learn a bit more about Buddha. And there was a really intricate painting, basically, and which was not painting, it was
That's
tapestry.
tapestry.
And there are lots of different stations you can learn about Buddha. And the key thing from I recall is that he tried out both having excesses of indulgence and doing excessive self
Mortification.
mortification. So basically, having too much and having too little, and he found that extremes of both were not good. So having like a fine balance is really uh, kind of the key thing, the middle way. And a lot of the teachings were reminded me of kind of Christian teachings in some ways, about like kind of attachment, of how you view the world, about forgiveness, etc. So there were it was interesting to see about how
That's really
like
cool.
the similarities between the religions, and like the wisdom, the you could say wisdom scripture, or wisdom spirituality.
Yeah.
So I
Exactly.
enjoyed that. And also, if the views had been better, we could have seen an amazing views of all of these hills and forested places, etc. I think like nearly 80% of Sikkim is forest, so you can see that when you're winding around all
It's
these
really
mountains.
beautiful, like loads of winding roads.
But the issue I
Climb up.
think now is like Darjeeling is extremely overcrowded, so quite busy, and there's basically most of the days there's a heavy layer of smog that was there.
Or mist.
But a lot of it was, I think, smog as well, because of just how it gets contained. Nepal is apparently the same as well, due to like
In Kathmandu.
yeah, lots of vehicles, and just the mountain ranges just collect all the smog and mist. So we unfortunately didn't get that many great views of
Yeah.
of the whole valley, basically, but we at least got some little snippets of it. And,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
yeah, adjusted to the different temperature.
Yeah. And it like we started from New Jalpaiguri, which is the nearest train station. We stayed a night in Siliguri, then got a bus up to Gangtok. And there's loads of like thin, winding roads up all these hills, which is really beautiful. But the bus took like I think it was like 8 hours. So that was quite a big pain on the way there. After that, we just got the shared jeeps and we went to Gangtok, which is the capital, but we stayed outside. We were basically trying to avoid big settlements and just enjoy nature. And yeah, we stayed in a really nice kind of hotel. A lot of places that we've noticed in the maybe middle income countries that we visited, lots of places that try to be posh but aren't posh. I don't know if we can call them posh fake, where like the decor is stunning, like the actual like the bathroom or the rooms, they might put little, they might fold your towel into the shape of a swan, but then the toilet seat's broken and the hot water goes off after like 3 minutes when you have a shower, so you have to end up with a cold shower. Or this amazing a la carte menu with, you know, 200 items from all across the world. You go to the restaurant and there's only 5 items available, and the staff are dressed in like very smart suits, but they're just wearing bright trainers at the bottom. I'm describing our hotel in Gangtok, but we've noticed aspects of that in other places, which was interesting. And then it was so cold, but you have to order a heater. It costs an extra like £3 a night, which isn't bad, but the room itself is only maybe like 10 quid. So it is a significant addition for the value. And then it's like a tiny halogen heater that barely heats up the room. You just have to stand in front of it. And we also noticed that our other accommodations in Pelling and Darjeeling, maybe it's like England would have been and cold countries would have been like 50, 70, 80 years ago, where it was all single glazing and there was drafts coming through the door and through the windows and no proper heating system. So really, we're used to the cold in England, but central heating is quite a marvel. And there's insulation and double glazing and all this other stuff. So the cold actually was quite tough, and I think it made me realize that I actually do prefer hot environments because if it has good temperature control, then you can do whatever. But we didn't really want to hang out in our hotel rooms where anywhere in Sikkim really because it was cold, and it was too cold to just sit outside in a park and read a book. So you're basically adventuring and out and about, which was fun. So it felt like more of an adventure, but maybe not as relaxing as you would have expected. But yeah, and something that was really cool as well that we really enjoy is seeing people who are Indian. But if you were to see them on the street in England, then they would look East Asian or Chinese. So that's something that we really love. Some of the kind of local ethnic Sikkimese people, the Bhutia, the Lepcha, because they historically came from the Tibetan region, which China kind of tried to invade or take over in the 1950s. They look what we would call Chinese, and it's really cool because some of them dress like Indians and they have that subconscious head wobble like Indians. They speak Hindi like many Indians. So yeah, that was quite cool. Just to again, like we talked about in the previous episode, perhaps how diverse India actually is. So I think that's something that makes Judah interested more in the Northeast.
Yeah, and what was quite nice as well. So we stayed at homestays, which was a new concept for me. Is when you are apparently living with a family and eating with them, etc. But the truth is, like the homestays, is they may make the meals, but there's a language barrier. I think the English is quite limited.
Yeah.
And so you'd have your meals, but you'd be kind of separate from them. So you'd be eating traditional Nepalese food, and you'd see the family laughing and having fun in the other corner of the room, but you're not able to really engage with them because of the language barrier. Even though I think they did try their best, but they probably have such a turnover of people at this, some of these homestay slash hostels, and so both of them we realized by we had a really good experience of a church actually on Sunday, and that was basically by attending the Baptist Missionary Society accommodation in Calcutta, and there was a guy I met called Andy, and he basically had he's German but Indian citizen as well, few generations down, and basically he was really really kind and gave us someone's contact who was in Sikkim, and then they contacted two further people, and eventually there was someone in Pelling who said they'll pick us up and take us to church. And the special thing about that was we would have Benji and I wouldn't have had a chance to really, I don't know, be invited into that type of environment normally.
Yeah.
But I guess because there's a recommendation as well, it's warmer as well. So Benji and I went to this church, which is a Nepalese speaking church.
Really cool, like a house church.
And there's some stuff what we really liked was, yeah, the pastor picked us up, and they were actually late to their own service to pick us up, and we went there, and a lot of the songs, like we've seen in East Africa as well, when there's the Christianity's influences, often they'll do their songs in their own language, but they're basically translated from English hymns, basically. Like Seek Ye First the Kingdom of God, etc. So Benji and I recognized some of the songs. Then they asked Benji we asked us to come to the front, and Benji did a little speech. And we're kind of used to going to little churches or big churches sometimes and being asked to stand up and introduce ourselves. And so at first in East Africa we found it quite challenging, but this time we kind of expected it. So Benji spoke for about 2 minutes and 47 seconds because the video is that long. Then I went to the front, switched the piano on, and just started doing singing. And so we all did some worship together, and I sang a few songs in Hindi, a few songs in English, and even though I don't think everyone knew all the songs, that was a very special time of connection. Yeah. And then after that, what was really cool is the cute little kids At the end, they all come to all the adults and they bow their heads basically slightly, and you as an adult are meant to put your hands on their heads to bless them. And
Yeah.
so that was really cute because he just got these little oriental looking children just coming, and you just blessing them on their head. So that was like very sweet. And then there's this older lady who reminded us of Pocahontas's grandmother,
Very,
with
very wrinkled.
wrinkles but really smiley
Very sweet.
face. And so I dipped my head down for her to kind of bless me in my head as well. Um, and I enjoyed sitting next to her, even though we couldn't communicate to each other. That's kind of relationship I had with my grandma as well, who had very limited English, but was very sweet as well.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, we got invited to the family. Got to teach a few of the kids ukulele and interact with them. So you've just got this invite into the culture in a way of having um, a shared experience. I think helps basically that isn't a transactional one.
Yeah, and I think that's like, I think I'd love to do a whole episode on that actually about us traveling as Christians, or you could even say maybe I can coin the term Christian backpacker, because like Judah said, you really get an insight into the local culture that I think a traveler passing by in just a week could never. And like you said, the kind of transactional type relationship. So yeah, Judah, that was definitely really cool. And that was in Pelling. So Gangtok is the capital city. Lots of people start there. You can do lots of trekking in Sikkim. Pelling, I think, is the second most visited little town just because it's very beautiful scenery and you can see the mountains clearly from there if it's a good day. And we just visited loads of different places, hiking up to monastery, seeing good views. Um, yeah, just doing a type of holiday we've never really done. And because of the cold, we didn't sleep so well. Um, because yeah, I think we kept waking up with the cold, and even going to bed with hats and gloves and socks. So yeah, it can get very cold in India. And afterwards, we went down to Darjeeling. So Darjeeling actually used to be part of Sikkim. So like Judah said, Sikkim used to be this kind of Himalayan mountain kingdom with Tibet to the north, Nepal to the west, Bhutan to the east, and India to the south. And Buddhism was like the a national religion which came from Tibet, and the original inhabitants came from Tibet like 5 centuries ago. Um, but the British in 1800s, they saw Darjeeling and saw it could be of strategic importance, but also they found the heat quite intense. So they did, I think, a bit of a slight deal. Jude, I don't know if you knew the exact details of. Basically, I think, yeah, they basically managed to get Darjeeling for like very little money. Either there was pressure or stuff, and then they left Sikkim alone. But then Darjeeling became like one of the premier hill stations. If you've heard of that phrase, it's basically places in India that are higher up and much cooler during the summer months, which if you're from England probably were and probably still are intolerable. So the British capital was in Calcutta until 1911. So Darjeeling became a hill station, and they also built a very kind of iconic railway system, which at that time was very technologically savvy, basically going through the hills. Like they call it a Darjeeling Himalayan Mountain Railway. So we had a lot of hype about Darjeeling. I think with domestic Indian tourists, it's very popular because maybe you see the British history, but also it's cool and it's lower down than Sikkim. So it's like from the train station, maybe 3 hours to get there, as opposed to 7 hours to get to some other parts of Sikkim. And we heard it was very crowded, and yeah, probably 2 days was perfect, like how we spent. And because it was built up though, there was a really cool zoo and a really cool natural history museum, and also there was the Himalayan Mountaineering Institute. So there was some like cool places, and there were tea gardens. So we did have fun exploring, but also it was loud and noisy when you go into Darjeeling. But that's where we we did a kind of loop, so we could go back to the train station in only a few hours. And yeah, we're going to Spent time with our mother and brother who are visiting from England, which we're very excited about. Judah also had his birthday while we were away, and I think we feel refreshed after seeing a different part of India. In fact, we really enjoyed the nature in the hills, and when our mother and brother come, we want to go back up there to a different town called Mirik, apparently a very beautiful little lakeside hill station that's less known on the Nepali border. And yeah, I think just being away from big cities is something that I realize I enjoy, which I wouldn't have necessarily realized. I mean, Indian cities are intense, to be fair. They are some of the biggest concentrations of humanity on the planet, and the pollution is some of the worst, as I've spoken about before. But I've always lived and grown up in cities. I would have probably thought myself as a city person. When I go on holidays, it's often around cities. But this year of traveling has taught me that actually I really enjoy the nature and the quietness, and that's something that maybe Jude and I can be more intentional in our next and final 6 weeks together in India. We haven't got as many set plans, so we can probably be intentional. And towards the Punjab region, there's also lots of hill stations.
Yeah, and maybe just things to note if you do plan on, I guess traveling, but especially traveling in India. So the east side of India and then northeast is that you just really need a lot more layers, but also it's better to travel worldwide. It seems that you benefit from traveling more than one person. You get to split your costs, and often the rooms you pay for two people is the same price as a single person. So
Yeah.
um, Sikkim was so cold that the first night, like it was Benji and I slept so poorly, even though we had a hat on, a gloves on, etc. And then it's quite hard to get a hot water bottle sometimes. So then we realized each of us is hot water bottle. So actually, I had closer proximity to Benji. Normally, I like my space at night, but actually, I needed to be close to him because he enabled me to. I slept actually super well that next night when I slept. We're in the dormitory and basically head to toe, and basically he warmed me up. So it actually helps when you're cold. It makes a big difference having one other person there with you, warming you up. So that's a benefit of having that kind of tight proximity. But unfortunately, Benji had something to eat one of the days in when we were in was it Pelling? It wasn't Pelling, no, it was
Darjeeling.
Darjeeling.
From Darjeeling.
And unfortunately, that was a very unpleasant night. I slept unwell, not with that one that night, because there was very interesting smells coming from him. So that's one thing is, especially if you're going to hot countries, some people will think, okay, I'll pack as if I'm only going to a hot country. But the truth is, you're going to be going to air-conditioned places, probably quite a lot. And so what I've done is having Indar in northeast because it's so cold sometimes. But then when the sun comes on, it gets super hot. So you can have a big coat around you, but at least having a jumper wherever you go and wrapping it around you, like around your waist when you're not using it, is probably for me the best hack I found for enabling when it gets cold to be able to just quickly put on a layer or take a layer off. Because you might just suddenly pop into a taxi and then you go from 35-degree heat all the way till basically it's sometimes 18 or 19 and you can feel it's a bit cold. So even like on the airplanes, I will bring like an extra layer or two because I know it can actually get cold on the airplane. So it's best worth thinking about like having gear for cold weather as well as hot weather when you're both in East Africa but also in India as well. Um, and I think that also Benji and I were we've got like I've got ulcers on my mouth now after this trip. Benji's got a sty in his eye.
I've got an
So
internal
actually,
audio,
yeah, it felt like because
like an active holiday.
yeah, an
right?
active holiday, but also because of the sleeping arrangements, we they often have like a very thick blankets basically, but they probably have not been washed for quite a long time, so the heavy layers of dust on them, and they were damp around a lot of the walls,
There's some mold.
extremely cold, so you can't really wash your clothes very easily either because just they won't dry. So think about like UK weather. Sometimes you hardly see the sunlight, and so Benji's and I's bodies were in not the best condition, being there for a week because just accommodation is a lot more poor than the big cities where we've been in, and a lot more issues of damp. and stuff. So you can see why already that affects, even though we're traveling, it does affect your physical self and mood. So just something to consider is it's good to be maybe a few days, but I don't know if I'd want to live there just because of the how cold the climate was. But at least in here in the hot countries, or I mean in hotel rooms, Benji and I have learned certain methods of making sure that we're cool during the day as well as during the night. So it was just adjusting anyway. So those are just some things to be prepared for when you're traveling to hot countries in particular.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for me.
And for me as well. Until next time.
Take care.
Thanks.